When my book Unsettled Matters first came out in 1996, I was not expecting and was surprised by the backlash that I received for mentioning that Bruce Lee had used anabolic steroids. I really didn't expect it. In thinking about it, I came to recognize that Bruce Lee had gone through a whole Madison Avenue merchandising campaign. When MCA Universal bought the rights with their movie The Dragon, they bought the merchandise, all the merchandising rights. And MCA Universal stands for Merchandising Corporation of America. That's what they do. It's an advertising, worldwide merchandising. And they did a good job. I mean, they had an agenda, and they promoted Bruce in the movie Dragon, and a lot of other things that they did to be a man who walked on water. I mean, Bruce was labeled as Saint Bruce. He was a perfect father and husband. He was the toughest man on the planet. He could beat everybody, including Muhammad Ali and anybody else that thought they could beat him. He was a great philosopher to the magnitude of a Dalai Lama. I mean, he was just he had the perfect physique. He had the perfect outlook on life. He had this wonderful philosophy that he had studied in the University of Washington. And I mean, they promoted him as somebody that was almost godlike. And for me to say that he used anabolic steroids was almost like my saying that the Dalai Lama had used anabolic or heroin or something, I mean, they just, a lot of Bruce Lee's fans, especially his young fans, absolutely thought that I was lying, I was making it up, I was vengeful. I mean, I just read the emails and the posts on the internet, and I just wasn't expecting it. Of course, now there's a lot more that's known about Bruce, that he was really a regular person. He was an extraordinary martial artist, no question about it. And he had a drive to be successful. There was a lot of positive things that could be said about him. But a lot of things that were said about him just were really over the top. And it really took a while for that to calm down. And even then, when the steroids were first around Bruce in the late 60s, they were very, very popular in sports. They were widely used in amateur. They've been used in the Olympics by the Russians since the 50s. And of course, our medical experts scoffed at it and said, they don't do anything. They have no effect. Well, we found out they had an effect. And so they were widely used by people in athletics. They were widely used by people in show business, and martial artists were using them. I knew several martial artists who were using them, and several people in Bruce Lee's circle, both in and out of the martial arts, were well aware of steroids, and a good number were using them. So it shouldn't have been a big mystery, and at that time they were legal, they were easily obtainable, they were not expensive, and no one was really talking about any adverse effects at all to using steroids. So, I mean, I often ask the question to people, Bruce Lee was well known to use all kinds of supplements to be able to gain his muscular physique that he had, and that he worked on very hard. I mean, some of the things that he put in the blender were mind-boggling. I mean, he would put eggs in the eggshells and raw meat and desiccated liver powder. If you've ever tried desiccated liver powder, there's nothing worse on the planet. And the vitamins and these concoctions that he was eating, and the protein and the creatine and it was just a long list of things that he was ingesting to gain musculature. And I know at one point, I think Joe Louis mentioned in a magazine in an article, he said as hard as Bruce Lee was trying, he was having a difficult time putting on the muscles that he wanted, especially on his legs. And here's a man that Bruce Lee, who said in his personal chief aim in life that he wanted to be rich and famous, and that was his aim, and that's what he was, and his martial arts were going to do that. And I don't know that he said no to anything that he thought would help him achieve that goal. I don't know of one thing that he was ever looked at and said no to. And I asked people, knowing all of that, tell me why he says no to steroids. Someone comes up to him, as they did, and said, you know, Bruce, if you really want to have want to add muscle to you, you should try these steroids or human growth hormone. There's a number of products you can use, and you'll get gains, and they're healthy, they're perfectly legal, there's nothing wrong with them, no bad side effects, and you'll get the gains. Or look at this person and that person, this person. Around that time, Sylvester Stallone was arrested in Australia for bringing, I think, 48 vials of human growth hormone into Australia. And look at Arnold Schwarzenegger, who came out in Mr. You think he gained those by eating protein? It was well known in bodybuilding. It was just well known. So my question to people is, tell me why Bruce Lee says no. A man who's never said no to anything else that he thought would help, promote his goal, help him achieve his goal. Tell me why he says no. And no one has ever been able to answer that. Had he said, well, no, they're just terrible for me, I'm not taking those, but they weren't. I mean, nobody had any of that. There was something, however, that we know that turned him off of these steroids, and I don't know what it was. I have a feeling it might have been his mental, emotional, that he felt that he was emotionally getting out of hand. Maybe there's something happened when he first started using them that he didn't want to. He wanted to stop them. If you read his drug letter that he wrote to Bobby Bleecker, and I wrote it down here. He writes to Bobby Bleecker. He says, I told Linda to call you and forget about the stuff because I really don't need them in my training. I feel that I have gained in trying them, but excessive indulgence of them just isn't in my road in Jeet Kune Do. Notice the plural. I told Linda to call you to forget the stuff because I really don't need them. That's not one drug. That's numerous drugs. He didn't say, I don't want this anymore because of singular. That's plural. And that's how steroids were being used early on. There was a number of these steroids that you used jointly together. It wasn't just one, it was a bunch of them. And Bobby Bleecker, who supplied cocaine, marijuana, mushrooms, LSD, Bobby Bleecker could have very easily got his hands on steroids. He supplied cocaine, which at that time, was the glamour drug of the 70s. So Bobby Bleecker was the one who was initially supplying the steroids, although there was another source. But something turned Bruce off of them when he said, "Stop! I don't want these anymore." I have a feeling it's how he felt inside. It didn't, because you walk around all the time really tensed up. It's almost like you're just tense all the time because of it. And I think he was smart enough to equate that with his elevation in testosterone. Bleecker, and we know that when he wrote that letter to Bobby Bleecker, that Bobby Bleecker was in town, or he was coming into Los Angeles before Bruce left for Hong Kong. It's clear from the letter. And so this would have been in 68, 69. And so I think Bruce had the idea that they would be helpful for a short term, just for a movie or two or whatever it was he would use it for. But he couldn't keep it up. When my statement that Bruce was using anabolic steroids first came out in my book, I had a lot of people say it couldn't possibly be, and here's why. And one of the first objections that people took was that just look at Bruce's body. He's not built like an NFL football player, and he would be if he was taking anabolic steroids. He would be huge, and that's just not true. There's a lot of athletes professional athletes and amateur athletes and Olympic athletes who, if they can get around the testing, who use anabolic steroids, and they're not NFL football players. They don't have that look. And they can't have that look, and they can't carry that weight in some of the athletics that they do. Probably the best example is Lance Armstrong, who won the Tour de France 7 consecutive years using anabolic steroids. And he finally, got found out for it. But if you look at his physique, he looked a lot like Bruce. His upper body looked a lot like Bruce. He doesn't look like an NFL football player. And if he had all that massive muscle mass on him, he couldn't win that event. So that people who take steroids can come up with any look that they want. It's just the way that they train and the way they take the steroids. But not everybody turns out to be an NFL football player. The other one, of course, was the statement that I talked about earlier, where they said Bruce would never take anything that was detrimental to his health. Never. And I believe that was probably true in the late 60s. I think he hedged on that a little once he went to Hong Kong. But had he known that those drugs were highly detrimental, I'm sure he wouldn't have taken them. But he didn't know that, and they weren't illegal. I've had my own dealings with testosterone levels. Having one other similarity that Bruce and I have is that I also lost a testicle. Mine was in 1980 from testicular cancer, so I had a surgery and had one of my testicles removed. Bruce had his surgery in March of 1969, which was a critical period for him because that's when he was really making an effort to gain more muscle mass. But I noticed after my cancer, after my testosterone production from my body had now been cut in half, I noticed a marked difference in my energy level, in my focus. I could definitely notice that there was going to be an adjustment period, hoping that the one surviving testicle was going to catch up with having to double up on the production. But even with that, by the time I turned 50, I noticed that I was losing that battle. At one point, I had heavy weight gains. At one point, I went up to 240 pounds, which for me was quite heavy. And then I was going to meet a friend for dinner. He is older. He's about 10, 15 years older than I am. Probably 10 years anyway. And I hadn't seen him in a long time, maybe a couple of years, at least a year and a half. And we were going to meet at a restaurant, and we were going to meet for dinner. And I'm waiting there, and this fellow walks by me who looked kind of like him, but I thought, no, that's not him, and he walked past. And then I heard him behind me. He walked back, and I said, Michael? And he said, yeah. I said, I hardly recognized the guy. He was really trim. He'd always been a little on the heavy side. He was always kind of a little, he looked overworked a lot, but he looked 20 years younger. He had a step to him, a liveliness to him. He had his eyes were clear. I mean, he looked 20 years younger. I was just amazed. It's like he had found the fountain of youth. And during dinner, he told me that he was on testosterone replacement therapy, which since has become extremely popular in this country. But he was taking a gel that he was rubbing on he told me he was rubbing on his shoulders. And that was the big change. He had a new girlfriend. Life was great, and I was impressed. And I told him that I'd been feeling tired, and I seemed to be able to focus the way I used to. He said, well, you ought you ought to have your testosterone level checked by your doctor, which I did. And it turned out that my testosterone was really low. I think it was 200 and I think it was around 200, 250, and it should be around twice that at my age. It was low. And so my doctor agreed to, put me on the same gel. And my friend and I used to laugh, together about gelling up. We would laugh. But when I started that testosterone replacement therapy, I really noticed an improvement in my overall being. And I have been on that therapy since then. So it's been close to 14 years, I would think. And I don't abuse it. I do not abuse it. I keep my testosterone level what it's supposed to be for my age. And I don't, I'm not injecting a whole lot more so that I can, I know guys who are my age who are using it, and they're going a little bit overboard. I can tell when I see them. But I keep my testosterone what it should be for my age. And I noticed a marked difference in my overall being, and it really has swept the country. I mean, the men that are on testosterone replacement therapy have actually quadrupled in the last couple of years, and you see ads all the time about all kinds of supplements that you can take to boost your testosterone. It became very, very popular. But for me, the simple thing is to just take, testosterone, which the way I've gone. So I've had my own battle with testosterone level, having been caused from losing a testicle. So I had a really understanding of what Bruce had gone through, and I think that if he were living today, that he probably would be on testosterone replacement therapy. That it's just the way the body works, hormonally. There's just no way around that. So when I started writing about Bruce's use of anabolic steroids, I made a decision that I wanted to have a first-hand experience of them, because I just wanted to have a sense of what I was writing, not from just what I thought about or what I read about. I wanted to get a first-hand experience of it, if I could. And I went to my doctor, who was known to prescribe anabolic steroids, and I asked him if I could cycle a round of steroids. And I think it was either 6 or 8 weeks. I can't remember right now, because this was back in 1992, I believe. I was 46 years old. Anyway, he examined me and he said, "Yeah, you're in good health. We can do that." And it was a combination of things. It was injections. It was pills, and there was a schedule by which you took them. And he gave me the schedule. He gave me all of the steroids, and I began. And I started to notice almost immediately. The first thing I noticed was my desire to work out. Around that time, prior to steroids, I was in good shape. I was running on the track maybe twice a week. I was a member of a fitness center, and I went there twice a week, and I worked out in martial arts once or twice a week. And then I was out working on houses and buildings, so I was in pretty good shape, but I didn't overdo anything. I mean, I'd go to the health club, the fitness center, and I would be there for 40 minutes, a step class, a round of lifting weights, and go home. And but I noticed after starting these steroids that started increasing. My desire to go and work out started to double and then triple. Instead of going twice a week to the fitness center, I was going several times a day. I'd go in the morning, afternoon, and then sometimes I'd catch a step class or a workout in the evening with weights. I was running the track more and longer distances and at faster speeds. My martial arts was stepping up as well. I really found myself, once I was well into steroids, an intense desire to work out, and in the intensity. If I was just doing a light jog at the fitness center on the treadmill, I now had it up at the top speed it would take, which I think was a 10. And I was just like running a sprint on that treadmill. I just had this intense desire to work out. And I felt that was reminiscent of Bruce. I never knew anyone who worked out as hard as he did. And so I felt that might have been a real driving force for him in 1969, when he really started increasing these workouts tremendously. The second thing I noticed was the amount of strength that I was gaining. I started keeping records of some things. I remember one afternoon I was in the weight room, and a young woman walked up to me and she said, "You know, you're maxing out that calf lift." It was the one where you work the hamstring, where you lift the back way of your lower leg. And I had that machine maxed out doing lifts. I don't know, I can't remember how much weight was on there, but I could do it easily. And I remember my my bench press, which is one of the weight lifts that people watch if they're working out. What's your maximum bench press? And you're always trying to, if you could put a couple of pounds on in a week or two, maybe 5 pounds. God, if you could make 5 pound gain in a week or two, that was in your maximum bench press. That was pretty good. That was you could say, oh, I've got some gains here. And I would go in on a Monday and I would do my max bench press, and I'd write that down. And then I'd go in Friday and I'd say, I should try my max this morning, and I would have a 10 pound gain. And the first time that happened, I said, well, this is just a mistake. I mean, I must have wrote this down wrong. But that actually continued happening. I mean, the gains that I was making was substantial, and it was beyond the ordinary. I was also having some physical side effects. I had difficulty in sleeping. I had a number of physical things that I started noticing. That Bruce had the same thing. But the one thing I noticed more than anything was my aggression. Normally, I'm a pretty mellow guy. People that know me say, yeah, he's pretty laid back. And back then, prior to the 90s, I had a drinking problem. I mean, I drank, and when I drank too much, I could become aggressive and obnoxious. And I finally just said, I've had enough of this. And my father had a drinking problem, and so I went to a 12-step program, and I stopped drinking. And I just don't drink anymore. But in 1990, when I started the program of the 12-step program, this was basically 2 years down the road, and so I was a pretty mellow guy. People who knew me said, yeah, he's pretty laid back. That all started to change once I got into those steroids. I became short-fused, short-tempered, aggressive, even physically. I remember one time I was driving, near the end, I was driving through Monterey on my motorcycle. I had a motorcycle and a truck and a few vehicles, and either I cut in front of somebody or something happened. The guy went past me and he flipped me off, and I flipped him off, and he pulled over and he jumped out of his car, and he had some friends with him, and this guy was big. I mean, he was a big guy. Didn't faze me in the least. I didn't care if they all got out of the car, and I was going to take them all on. This guy started coming. I said, "Come on, bring it." And I was ready. I was going to punch him out, punch his friends out, punch his car out, and everything. And they got a hold of the guys that were with him got a hold of him and said, "Let's go. This guy's crazy." I don't know if they were their exact word, but they could tell that I meant business. I was ready to, I had, you know, a lethal look. And I noticed a lot of my friends weren't coming around as much anymore. And I even had a couple of friends come to me and ask what's going on with you, because they could notice I was getting this football player look, and I had this attitude and aggression, and they knew I was wearing it. And I think they strongly suspected that I was using steroids, because back then they were fairly popular. And I just said, no, I'm just working out a lot. I'm drinking a lot of protein powder, and you know, I think I'm just, you know, whatever. And that was at the height of the steroids. It was either 6 or 8 weeks in. And I got to tell you, when I quit those steroids, I was glad I was done with them. I said, I do not want to do this again. It wasn't worth the gains. But I saw what happened to me, and I could relate it to Bruce. And I said, I don't want any more of this. This is awful. And but another thing that happened to me, and it was really important for me to see this, was that once I stopped the steroids, some of my friends at the fitness center and stuff, I said, you know, I really would like to keep this going on. I didn't tell them why I thought they would disappear. But I said, you know, or maybe I did. Maybe I confided in someone and said, now that I'm not doing steroids, you know, I really want to keep this. I think I did. And the guy said, well, you just have to work out hard. Just keep working out as hard as you were working out. You just keep at it and come in and lift and run and do all of it. Just keep doing that. I said, okay. But 2 things happened. The first one was I started losing interest. Instead of going into the fitness center 2-3 times a day, I started going, you know, once a day. And then it was 3 times a week. I just didn't want to go as much. I didn't have that drive to work out like that anymore. And then I could stand in front of the mirror, and it was sort of like a slow melting iceberg. You know, you don't notice a little bit of that iceberg is going off every day, but one day you walk out and you say, God, that thing is a lot smaller. And that's what happened with me. I didn't notice it. Little by little, those musculature was leaving. And then one day I actually stood and I said, you know, you are not what you were before. And that was a wake-up call. I was not going to be able to keep it together. And the other thing that happened was, not only did I go back to the level that I was when I started steroids, I dropped below it, because my normal testosterone in my body production had been shut off, because I was taking all this other testosterone, and my body just clicked off my normal production. So when I stopped, I went below that. I lost the musculature, and I actually went below the musculature, and I became, if I was mellow before, this time I was really mellow. I was just, you know, I just went below what my normal level was. And I think Bruce was having those reactions too when he stopped, because you cannot keep taking them. The rule of thumb is, if you're three weeks on and an equal number of weeks off, you cannot keep, you know, taking them full time. 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off. So what happens is you're doing this all the time, up and down, up and down. You're like this, and then you're below your normal. And I understood that aspect of that when Bruce said to Linda, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. So as I mentioned, one of my main reasons for including Bruce's use of anabolic steroids in my book was that I wanted to give an explanation, a reasonable explanation that would explain Bruce's bouts of these violent episodes that he was having, that were completely out of character for him. It was not the Bruce that I knew and others knew. And I feel that the anabolic steroids is a reasonable explanation, and it's one that's been satisfactory to me and to many others who have read the book, and especially those who knew him and said, oh, now, okay, well, that explains what was happening to him. I understand there were other things going on in his life that were causing stress, and certainly the other drugs he was taking. But those violent acts of his were clearly, to me, were episodes of what's commonly known as roid raging. And I think once he had stopped using steroids, when he didn't need them anymore, I think he calmed down considerably. So that's why I included it. The main reason that I included it. You know, at the end of the day, I'm not sure if it really matters if Bruce used anabolic steroids or not. For me, it helps explain some of the negative things that happened to him that I know that he was fighting against. But as far as his physique and what he put in to get it, nobody takes anabolic steroids and sits on a sofa and grows muscles. And if anybody really thought that he was cheating to get the physique that he had, or he couldn't get it naturally, or all of that discussion that comes up, it doesn't matter to me. He worked for that physique that he had. He worked harder than anybody I have ever known. He earned every single muscle fiber that he developed. And whether or not he used steroids or drank these incredible concoctions of protein drinks and things that he was putting in, doesn't matter. He still did the work. He still ran. He still did the endurance. He still did the weights. He still did he did it all, and he did it every day. And he earned that physique.
Thank you.